Gonna take notes. Got a couple of books. I actually have a textbook I wrote. It's specifically designed for this class. All right? Okay, here's the first quiz question. When was the last time a professor wrote a book specifically for the class you were taking, and he was editing the book during the semester, putting your comments into the book, so when I hit the carriage return, you get the updated book? That's what I'm talking about, all right? So that's the kind of class you're entering into right here. It's based upon another book I wrote called How to Build the Open Mesh, right? And it's only until the ideas become books, and there's some sort of artifact, that people actually start to respect the ideas, right? But needless to say, they're available in PDF form for free download. So don't think like you have to buy the book or anything. If you want to buy the book, it's through a service called Blurb, which is an on-demand book publishing service, okay? And so I actually tried to plan this all out. Oop, here's my daughter. And that is this mural I painted on my backyard fence to help figure out these ideas of a distributed architecture. All right? But first, let's go back to the book. And what we're going to do for now, for the next few minutes, is I'm going to introduce myself and these crazy ideas in this book I have. And then what I've done is I've gone through and I've marked up the book to delineate this recording. Question?
There's a button on the overhead that will keep it from refocusing every time you move it around.
That one. All right. And I can pull back if it's too. All right, so I've marked up my book so that as I'm going through this lecture and I use the book, I timestamp, I put an audio stamp in the recording. So then I take the recording, I'm going to splice it up, attach it to permalink pages. Each permalink page gets what? What would you think a permalink page gets? Metadata, URLs, attachments. And where would we want to take that permalink page to, the next stage? Student comments, ratings, right? So this is a system called Media Vision they have here at Case. And apparently some of the professors haven't been taking full advantage of it. And that's my job, to push the envelope, to inspire, and to get you off your asses to do something. Right? Because this is not a class just a blah, 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 blah. Right? This is about doing things. So someone earlier was bringing up about projects and stuff. We're totally into projects, multiple projects, starting companies, writing code. So who knows the difference between RGB and NTSC? Okay? I have to tell you a funny story, sir. Hello Megan. Back in 1987, a young cub reporter came to me and said, Mark, I'm going to become an expert at multimedia and I'm going to learn everything you know. I said, cool, let's start off with what's the difference between RGB and NTSC. So 1 year later to that day, he announced a conference he was putting on that he was an analyst, an expert in the industry. So the secret message there is that everybody starts as a newbie. And it's up to you to decide how far you want to go and how much of an expert you want to be. Because this technology stuff is moving so quickly, by definition, you can't ever be done. Because think of it this way. In fact, I ran into a professor who also works at NASA, right? His day job is NASA. He comes over here to teach a class, right? But you know, he wants to stay sharp. He wants to stay on the cutting edge, so he's constantly learning new things. In our business, no one wants to stop and retire. Right? It'll constantly be moving forward, and we're in a constant state of change. And that's what led me to realize that any architecture that has to work for the future has to be a system that's designed to work in a constant state of change. And as much as we thought that Microsoft won, or that Google is the shit, there's gonna be somebody else coming after, by definition, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, whatever. Right? So it's in that environment that I've designed this kind of an architecture and these common notions of what I call a dashboard. Right? So we're going to dig into that. All right? But this is the introductory section, so I get to go like this. Vediamo hissenescano ruscade. So now you know I am really an opera singer, and we can get that behind us. Okay? All right. So this will be the intro, and so here's the first timestamp. Hi, my name is Marc Canter. Welcome. Destroy the mic. Oh, well, we're going to have to start that over, Ed. That was a really good segue. Ed, do you have another mic or what? I literally ripped the cable. So you got to have a lot of momentum behind your movement. Did I just break it or what? Does it still work? Hello? Hello?
How about?
I mean, I don't need a mic. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Nope.
Nope. I mean, it's because I...
Might be short in the wire. Oh, yep, that's
Totally.
done. So, there's this microphone.
All right. Who needs a microphone when you can roam around? Okay. So. Okay. All right, so it's going to be really hard for me to stand still, but I'll try to start a lecture on the notion of what is a digital city and how to build a digital city. Okay, that's the theme of why we're here today. All right, so we're going to switch over to this guy. And I just happen to have a presentation on this very subject. And it's why I came to Northeastern Ohio. I will use the term Neo. We're not talking about Keanu Reeves or anything, right? Though he is the one. But we are here to talk about 3 areas of focus. And you can see where you guys are all manipulative pawns in the system, all right? So I show up and I say, okay, I want to innovate workforce development. To do that, we need a sustainable business model. So you can immediately think, wow, we're already out of EECS. We're over into Weatherhead. We're going to all these other things. But it's okay, because cross-disciplinary is a good thing, right? And we're going to do that sustainable business model by developing online multimedia content and services. So where you guys want to write tools and do kind of cool interactive stuff, that's very apropos to you. The services is kind of tantalizing, actually. But here's the stuff that's right up your alley. The third thing we're going to do is we're going to develop an open digital city platform, what Anish Chopra calls an innovation platform. Does anybody know who Anish Chopra is? Okay, he's the new CTO of the United States of America, right, that Barack hired, okay? And he's telling people, hey, we need innovation platforms. We need environments where creative people can create. And that's exactly what we're going to build here. And we're going to do that with open source software that you're going to write. Okay? So that's the projects. And we all get to decide what those projects are. And I'm just going to keep doing this until we get this built. Does anybody want to guess how long it'll take? 5 years. 5 years. Guess over there in the black shirt. How long? Oh, you just wave it. Okay. We got the replacement guy? Beautiful. All right. I'm going to say 3 years. I'm going to put a stake in the ground and say 3 years, okay? By the way, let me give you a little historical background. 1984, I started Macromind. 1987, we got venture capital investment. 1988, we were the first software company in the South of Market area. 1994, our multimedia revolution ground to a halt. Does anybody know why our multimedia revolution ground to a halt? There's this little straw thing called dial-up access. And all of a sudden, all the photos and videos got thrown out with the baby water, right? And 15 years later, we're picking up on it. So historical perspective, from 1984 to about 2001 was the learning curve of the world to get caught up to the potential of multimedia. And even today, people are still trying to grok multimedia. So the kind of time frames I want to ask you guys to think about is that it's been 25 years since I started Macromind. I want you to think about the next 25 years in that kind of Blade Runner Minority Report kind of time frame. And it's all you all that are going to be building out this future. And that's the kind of stuff we're going to be teaching in this class, okay? All right, so that's this whole chess game that we're playing here. We're all going to become masters. You're going to start as pawns, you're going to work your way up to rooks, and even you can become a queen one day. All right, now the themes of how we're going to innovate workforce development is that we're going to connect cyberspace, the world of online, to meet space. Whenever that happens, whenever you make things relevant to people, right? That's when you kick ass. That's when change happens, all right? And we're going to do that because people have expectations about what is digital. I wrote up here on the board, I don't know if you can see it. I was listening to music and video in the beginning, right? And the real world gets digitized. I know you all know what a D to A converter is, right? Right? It gets digitized into bits. And now we know that those bits go up into the cloud. They go onto our devices. They go into our PCs. They go into our game machines. They go into our living room. That's it. That's all the tech you need to know. That's what's up right now. And we're still dealing with the ramifications of that and how digital is affecting the newspaper business, affecting the bricks and mortar business, affecting love, affecting entertainment. It's everywhere. And there are no jobs in the future that won't need tech skills. So you guys are down as practitioners down into the bits, moving your registers and stuffing your accumulators and dereferencing your handles and doing your RESTful APIs. Well, meanwhile, these marketing folks over at the webhead got to figure this out. Well, how am I supposed to explain this to people? How am I supposed to get funding? And so they end up using buzzword mentality. Would you all like to tell me some of the current buzzwords du jour today in the marketplace?
Agile.
Agile.
Web 2.0.
Web 2.0.
Web 3.0.
Tim? Jim? Cork share. Next. Okay, next. More buzzwords. Come on. Twitter, Facebook, social networking. That's why you're here today. Okay. All right. Oh, here's my favorite one. Dashboard. All right. So we're going to talk about dashboards and how dashboards connect these things together. And this virtuous circle that I've invented, this way to get people to use social media to match up the haves and the have-nots. And how we're going to use live video help to do that. This is totally awesome. Okay? Now that leads us to a software infrastructure. So if you can think of Wi-Fi and all the pipes and all the bricks and mortar stuff that makes up infrastructure, well, what goes on top of the Wi-Fi? What's next after that? And that's what we're here to talk about. Okay? And a sustainable business model, because without money, you ain't got no honey. All right? And I think we could turn down the volume a little bit. Okay, so the online world connects to the real world, and the key thing here is that we're not about some certified training program, some sort of like, I want to register for the class and get a grade. We're not about this kind of slot a worker into a predefined notion of what the job is. The word job is typically thought of as something that's bad, especially to you slackers, all right? The idea here is that simply by making people comfortable using computers, they'll be ready for the future, right? I mean, my daughters, even today, are sent down the hallway to a classroom to learn computers, but only on Thursdays at 2:30. Can't use computers any other time, right? I mean, they're home playing Club Penguin and just totally assimilated, and they go to school, and the teachers are terrified of computers. And this is the reality, and I bet you could go up and down these hallways here and find plenty of professors who don't use computers, all right? So the idea here is that all jobs of the future require tech skills. Tech is the new screwdriver or hammer. Is there anybody here who disagrees with me? Good, because you can get the fuck out. Okay. All right. Now, here's the idea. If they can play video games, they can use an ATM machine. They can set up their portable devices. Why wouldn't they be able to learn computers, right? And the active agent here is social media. It's what puts people together. All software is about people, right? And we're going to match the haves and the have-nots. And when I talk about this live video help stuff that's coming, those are the haves. And they're going to volunteer, and we're going to write the code, and you guys are going to help me debug the code and test it. And literally, during the course of this class, this code's coming online in my platform called the People Aggregator. Okay? All right, so here's the fun time where we get to talk about I used to be famous. And if you all can make it through the next few weeks, each of you get your own Marc Canter baseball card. All right? This is a certified historical document representing the time before I moved to California. And since I lived in California for 21 years, that means that this document is exactly 22 years old. It's a timestamp. And I want to point out to you, what does it say? Marc wants to develop a multimedia encyclopedia. 20 years, well, 15 years before Jimmy Wales did Wikipedia, okay? So we're gonna talk all about what is a multimedia encyclopedia, what the hell are we talking about here? It all started with this company I started called Macromind, that became Macromedia. How many of you have copies of From Wagner to Virtual Reality, The History of Multimedia? Well, luckily for you, it's not a requirement to buy it. It is not available in PDF form, okay? But it is one of the reasons why I have hundreds of thousands of hits on Google, because it's a textbook. I'm chapter 17, Tim Berners-Lee is chapter 18. So like I said, I used to be famous, okay? And we can drill down into what the hell this all means. But like I said, this multimedia revolution we were doing ground to a halt in 1994 when the web came along, because we couldn't upload photos and videos on the web, right? And that's why we needed broadband, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is the Encyclopedia Britannica put online with some community and links. It's text with a photo. But that isn't the only way to represent knowledge and information. And then the revolution that we were starting in the 80s was, let me give you an example. So I go to a page on a battle. Gettysburg, D-Day, Dien Bien Phu, doesn't matter what the battle is. I expect to see animated arrows of the movement of the troops over a multi-day period of time. That's the way to represent a battle. If I went to a page on a green job database, right, and it was something on how to install a hot water heater or something, right, I'd expect to see a diagram that exploded, that was annotated. I'd double click, it would open up, it would show me the part list, it would show me a video of how to install the hot water heater, right? And if I went to a page on polymers, I'd expect to see this lady pouring these fluids together and creating some silly putty and, you know, all the things about how to make polymers. Right? Now, the reason why I use polymers as an example is that, in fact, the University of Akron is the world headquarters for polymers. Has any of you ever seen their building they have there? The Goodyear Center? It's about a $300 million building. They have 50 full-time PhD staff at the Polymer Center, right? But yet, if you go online, there's like a little slideshow on the history of these white guys who invented polymers. So the theory here is that education and knowledge and all information gets communicated through interactive multimedia, whether it's videos or simulations or visualizations or prototypes or mock-ups, whatever. There's a hell of a lot more ways you can communicate and educate than through text and a photo. And that's our opportunity. Because if you think about Minority Report and Blade Runner, could you imagine Harrison Ford going on to something about things and he's like reading this text? Ain't gonna happen, right? You know, Tom Cruise with the glove and stuff, he's going by and they scanned his eyeball and he's like reading text. I mean, come on, that's the way we did it in the 20th century. Right? But we got a new world coming on here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick up where this revolution took off and we're gonna train workers. So the 3-for-1 of this sustainable business model is we're gonna build out these multimedia encyclopedias. And so here's the idea. So I go to Mr. Strickland, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Representative Tim Ryan, this lady Nancy Pelosi. Have you heard of any of these people? They control billions of dollars. They're spewing this money. It's incredibly inefficient. So we say to them, look, for every $1 you give me, I'm going to build out multimedia encyclopedia projects. We're going to train workers in the job skills necessary to do that multimedia. And we're going to build you a digital city platform, all for the same dollar. And that's the sustainable business model. So this is where you guys are the pawns in the chess game, because you're going to be helping me build out this platform, all right? Now I'm going to come to town with this open source platform called the People Aggregator. About 1 million lines of code. We're up to version 2.1, all right? Available, blah, 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 URL. Download it, LAMP, we prefer Debian. Install, and you all get your own copy. So perhaps that's like my first assignment or something. I don't know. Someone already complained about course load. So, you know, if you don't want to do any work, please don't do any work. You already got an A, whatever. I'm so not about that. I'm about changing the world, okay? So we're going to have this free dashboard software. And next to every feature next to the blogging, next to the media sharing, next to edit my settings, next to the activity streams, next to the Facebook Connect, next to all these features is a little button. And the button says, Live Video Help. So the human opens up the software and registers and clicks. And up comes another human on the screen. Says, hi, how you doing? I am not a robot. I am a human, okay? And I'm here to alleviate your fears. Because the biggest problem with an ex-auto worker or a single welfare mom or a 55-year-old nurse who, like, you know, the 30-year-old nurses get it. It's the 55-year-old nurses that are terrified, right? It's why we still have pieces of paper in the health system, because the nurses refuse to use the computer terminals. This is what we're fighting. We're fighting these fears because we propped up Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg so much, and Steve Jobs. We put them on these pedestals. We say, oh, look at all the billions of dollars you can make. We forget about the fact that software is not about making money. That is not what software is for. Software changes the world. And if you can make some money along the way, great. But that's not its explicit purpose, unless, of course, it's financial software. Right? Software can change the world. I'm blessed to have helped change the world. Each of you can change the world. Right? All right, continuing on. So, question?
Why did they have this here in the first place?
In this room? In Stro Soccer?
No. Why do older people, as you mentioned, have this fear of software and like using programs in the first place? Where did this fear come from?
Oh, the fear. Well, there's a digital divide, there's a gender divide, there's lots of divides. There's an age divide, right? There's an economic divide. And each time we hit these divides, the young rich kids from the suburbs get all the latest stuff. In fact, this is what Apple was born and raised on, right? Apple was based upon the fact that they had the best shit. So all the rich kids would buy one of each. Well, by definition, if you got a Mac and everybody else got a PC, well, you're the cool dude. Well, what about everybody else who didn't get a Mac? All right, same thing with video game consoles, same thing with big screen monitors, same thing with cars. There's a place called Williams in Sonoma. They live off of rich people. But meanwhile, you got all the discount brokers for everybody else. So we've always had the have and have-nots. We've always had this divide.
Fear. How do you account for the fear if having a have-not does that create fear?
Yeah. All right. So let's switch over to the cognitive psychology, and here's one of the professors over here. So let me just I'll try to answer it and move on quickly. Okay. So I'm going to guess, Peter, that this is about unknown and about superiority and this mind share game that people play with each other, and I've got it and you don't. And so then you go onto this monitor, and this nurse tried to do something, and it had like the bracket and the CR. And she goes, what the hell does brackets with CR mean? Because us geeks love to use acronyms and weird terms and stuff. It's how we all bond. But the nurse doesn't know what brackets with the CR means. So she doesn't want to admit that she's stupid. Like right now, I met a guy 2 weeks ago who specializes in working with congressmen and senators in private sessions to show them how to use their BlackBerries. Because they won't admit to their staff that they don't know how to use it. So I mean, they're afraid to let someone know of their ignorance. So ignorance and fear, see, you're probably a smart person, you probably have never experienced this, but people who don't understand something and they see that everybody else does, they recoil back. So the trick and the essence of this project I want to do is that by having live video help, it means that at any time a human can reach out to another human. Now ideally, our software will start matching. So if a senior citizen clicks, it matches them to a senior citizen to help. Or if a kid clicks, or if I'm interested in gardening or amateur photography, it'll match me to someone who's into gardening or amateur photography, right? We can't do that in the early stages, but that's where we're going, with kind of intelligent routing of the help calls. Right? Okay, so what I want to do is, what I'll be showing you is this idea of a virtuous circle, of using this social media. And the whole thing starts with a user joining a system, okay? And they upload their face, and we show them, hey, look, you can read off the screen, right? And we tell them about discovering. See, in a lot of places in society, when you don't know something, they tell you to go read a manual, right? And I doubt that any of you read manuals. I don't, right? What you do is you take your mouse and you start clicking, and you see what works, right? So hopefully what will happen is they'll sit down with this software, they'll click, and they'll discover this live video help, all right? Then the live video help operator comes on and explains to them this notion of community, of something called add a friend, join a group, participate in a conversation, all right? Now then, as they're getting all this value, we're going to say, hey, would you like to help out yourself? Would you like to volunteer? Because we got all this money we're spending and all this stuff you're going to get for free, and we'd like you to be part of this community. And to do that, here's a list of local events that you can volunteer for, okay? And when you volunteer for it, you get points. And this is one of the ways we connect the online world to the real world. Because not only are they going to get points for going to the live event and carrying chairs, or going to the senior citizens home and holding doors, or whatever the real world volunteer task is, but we're also going to give them points for blogging and uploading a file and joining a group and leaving a comment. You get points for both. And of course all your cynical slackers are going, yeah, who cares about some stupid points? Okay? Do you remember the first time your name went on the leaderboard of a game? And you're at the bottom and you worked your way up and eventually your name is on the top of the leaderboard? That's the payoff. You become part of the virtual community, right? And we're going to teach you about this notion of contributing to the community, right? That once you get your points, you're starting to grow and you're working your way up to the leaderboard, there's now this key moment. So imagine we're going through the circle, and each time we're going through the circle, we're weeding out people to get to the better quality people who eventually they can become interns and get a job, right? So we want to get them motivated. But the key momentum in one of those sci-fi books where you talk about like getting the accelerated takeoff into hyperdrive, you know? When you get that boom, right? It's when you figure out that you're having such a good time, you invite your friends. And that's when you realize that Facebook and Twitter have never placed an ad. Right? 250 people, 250 million people. Facebook is the 4th largest country in the world right now. Never placed an ad. All right? And it's that kind of magic aha moment, that moment when you take the red pill. You know, you realize, I'm now part of this, right? And now as you begin your second loop through the circle, now we ask you, well, what kind of job would you like to learn? It's completely opposite from, here are some jobs, would you like to compete for them? Right? Because our haves, our volunteers, will be going online and volunteering, and Peter will volunteer for bike mechanic, and John will volunteer for alligator wrangler, and everyone will have these different jobs, and their faces will go up on this board, and if you want to be an alligator wrangler, you can learn it from John. Okay? All right, so now we're going through this circle, and I'm not sure if you all are hip to this. In the world of social media, 1% of the people do something. Actually create something. 9% engage, leave a comment, ratings, some sort of interaction. And then 90% just look at it, right? So as we're getting these people to go through this virtuous circle, the second time around, we want them to become part of the 9%. Where now, when they think about something, an affinity or something. I've been thinking a lot about ex-auto workers, so I've been thinking, well, this ex-auto worker is going to create a group called 67 Corvette group, right? So instead of joining a group, he's creating his own group. And when they see a conversation and some thread about something, and they get all pissed off and they want something to say, instead of just leaving a comment, they create their own blog post and create their own conversation. Right? And that's what I mean by engaging and become part of the community, right? And now the volunteer tasks we're asking them to do, instead of just carrying the chairs to the live event, they get to man the booth and explain our software to other people who come in the booth. And now when they go to the senior citizens home, instead of just like carrying the lights, they get to interview the senior citizens. Right? So this is how we build trust and engage with these people and get them to be part of our community. That leads to more points, leads to a relationship. Now, by the way, as you guys being slackers, I know you're already thinking about how to game the system. Man, I'm going to get me so many points. I'm going to set up a little bot. It's going to go out there. It's going to click and shit. Right? I mean, this is what happens, right? I know these guys on World of Warcraft, they like buy and sell rankings, and it's an incredible world out there when you get into this world of these alternative currencies, right? But the key thing about this thing is that we're going to have these digital bureaus. It's going to be a physical place where this stuff happens. We think we can have about 20 employees. We can handle about 100 trainees. It'll be the focal point of the project. And it ends up being a nice modular node. So when we talk about deploying up and scaling up, you know, each node costs 75 grand a month. It's going to have this many employees, this much training. And oh, by the way, one of the most intangible of job skills is how to be a manager. So for someone to progress around this circle, coming out the second time, to make it to the third time around, and when you begin the third time around, then you become an intern, and the fourth time around, you start getting paid. But to do that, you got to have a relationship with your manager. It's not just about the points. And that's a lesson about life. Because in life, you never progress unless you're sucking up to your manager. I mean, that's all about the relationship that you establish. And so if someone's sitting over in the corner just twitting and they got their bot going, they're generating a lot of points, well, it's the manager's job to notice, well, what's your name? Have you done anything to contribute to the community? Right? And it's that kind of balancing act, again, symbolic balance between the cyber world and the real world. We got to get the balance right, and everything will be cool. All right, so I'm glad you asked. What is a digital city? In the 1990s, if you read a Wired magazine article, they'd tell you all about Wi-Fi, and in the future, you'll be able to open up your computer and get access. So access is what a digital city meant in the 1990s. In this decade, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that it's social media, that you stand in line at the grocery store, and you're watching this lady update her Facebook account, right? I mean, I was standing in the basement in Crawford, waiting for my ID card, and I saw at least 20, 30 people updating their Facebook accounts, right? In the next decade, I believe what makes and defines a digital city with the availability of software infrastructure. All these servers that we're going to write in this class are going to be what digital city is. And if any of you would like to join me, September 23rd through 25th in Amsterdam, we're putting on Digital City Summit. All right? Turns out a good friend of mine 4 years ago applied for a grant to do the same kind of thing. 4 years later, he's finally getting some money. All right? So he's building out shared servers, software infrastructure. I want to do that here in Cleveland. I'm sure there's somebody in Moscow or Dubai doing it. And we'll all share our open source code between each other, and we'll all be able to provide software infrastructure. Okay? So what do I mean by software infrastructure? It's these shared servers that will be available that any software developer could build upon. All right? Now, do we all know the name Lev Ganek? Have we all gone there and kissed his ring recently? I did yesterday. Because I know which side of my bread is the butter. All right? So Lev says to me, how come I can't take lev.ganek@cwru.edu and log into the Cleveland Clinic? How come I can't take my ID and log into the libraries to pay my fines or taxes? If you're going to build a digital city, Mark, you better make sure we have a digital city ID system. Does anybody know of the technology that would enable us to do that? I'm glad you said OpenID because in fact it's not. So OpenID is a nice lightweight consumer kind of thing, but when you're talking about logging into Cleveland Clinic to find out whether you got AIDS or something, OpenID ain't gonna cut it. All right? Now the general school of thought is called federating an ID. There are a couple of different standards. The one we would use is called SAML, S-A-M-L. Okay? And in fact, there's an even more cutting edge thing called info cards that we'll probably use, because info cards will encompass the lightweight standards of OpenID, but also give us some security and encryption stuff to be able to do the safe, heavyweight ID stuff, okay? So there'll be one of the things we're going to drill into. All right, next one is a notion of a shared server, which is a timeline server, okay? So now we're going out and we're interviewing senior citizens. And we transcribe all those interviews, and we tag them with time. 1933, 1957, 1962, okay? Now we build this open source object XML store thingy with 2A APIs. And it has a user interface on it, so you can double click and scroll around and double click and dive down to 1933. And when you get to 1933, up comes the page of all the tags of all the video snippets that have been tagged with 1933. Then we go down to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Then we go over to the Cleveland Symphony. We say, hey guys, got anything about history? Would you please tag all that online stuff you've got? And then we go to the Underground Railroad. Then we go to the Western Reserve Historical Society. We get them all to tag their online information, and our server goes and picks up all those tags, and so that when I dive down into whatever that year is, all that tagged information comes up. Now that entire server is an open source platform that any software developer can then, with 2 APIs, go in and build out and leverage that open data. All right? Happens to be what they're doing in Amsterdam. So we get all their code. All right? Imagine similar shared servers around jobs or events or a business directory. Imagine when I say webcam or surveillance camera to you, you're probably thinking of like the most boring thing in the world, right? A camera that's just sitting there that just looks at this one angle forever, right? So what I want to do is in our platform, for each of our nodes, our digital bureaus, I want to have a grid of 16 or 24 cameras, but I want the decision of what those cameras are to be driven by a human, to be editorially directed. Right? Then in the morning time, at the fish market or the flower market, we get all the cameras of the interesting fish and flower angles. During morning rush, you get the streets, right? During lunchtime, you get all the people out during their lunch break, you know, walking around, people watching. Afternoon, the kids in the schoolyard playing. Evening, you get the sunset cams, you know. So you're editorially changing those cameras. Now, if at any time you click on one of those cameras, up would come a location page. That location page is dedicated to that camera. Here are all the people who live near this camera. Here are all the restaurants. Here are other related cameras. Here's comments, here's ratings about this intersection of where this camera is, this geolocation, right? Here are all the blog posts that were created in this region of where this camera is. And all that's available through 2A APIs as a shared open data. Right? So you're getting the idea of what these are about? And all these things that get created are open standards. OpenStack, free to the people. All right, well, I'm glad you asked because now I'm going to visually represent this digital city platform. So we start off with our federated ID system. And we layer in our webcams, right? And then we have all these bureaus. These bureaus represent Akron, the greater University Circle area, Collinwood, and Youngstown. Oh, by the way, this project is a portfolio project of the Youngstown Business Incubator. So if any of you want to have anything to do with the old retired steel industry, you do now. All right, now at every bureau are webcams. And those webcams are driving these live camera operators. Right? So it's important, I think, that in the early stages that the physical bureau have the live help operators there so they can learn from the community and everybody. But obviously, eventually, a really good helper operator can work at home. Right? All she needs to do is have her shirt on. Doesn't have any pants on. Okay. All right. So now we want to include in this environment the big co's, the institutions, the banks, all these large folks. We need their money. We need them to give us legitimacy. And we're going to create a business directory. Now, later on when I vamp about different kind of jobs, training people how to be programmers or training people how to be video editors is nice, but you're only ever going to get like 5 or 10% of the population to do creative jobs. You're going to still need normal people doing sales and marketing and operations and all that kind of stuff. To do that, we need a business directory, and that's why we've included a business directory. I won't spend the time on it right now, but it's a key part of the equation, okay? And here's the content. Let's see if we can do a quiz here. What's that job called? Green job, it's a green job. How about that guy? Underground Railroad. How about this guy? The history of polymers, of course. How about this one? Oh, those are those senior citizens. How about this guy? Type 2 diabetes, of course, right? It turns out that the university hospitals right here are specializing in type 2 diabetes. And we're going to pitch them and say, look, we want to build out some software and services to suck on some of that type 2 diabetes money, right? And we're going to take that money and we're going to use it to pay our programmers to build out shared servers, right? So we love type 2 diabetes, right? Okay. Anyway, we'll drill more into details of how that's all going to get done. And we got urban farming, right? So you think, well, what does urban farming have to do with tech jobs? Can anybody tell me here what urban farming, local foods, has to do with tech? Oh, come on, scratch your head, come on. Well, this is the challenging part of the class. All right. Dude, the only guy you answer, oh, these two guys. Okay, go.
Selling your food, which you just great.
Right, and you'd sell it online?
About it.
Yeah, so it turns out the City Fresh project goes out to the Amish and picks up all this food, right? And that they need to be able to communicate when they hit these farms back to the office. Well, they've got these eggs, they've got these squashes, what should I bring back? Because there's other people coming, organic markets, to buy this food from the Amish, right? So what to pick up? The other thing in the local foods world is cardboard, composting, and worms, and like lumber. So they go off and people say, well, hey, I've got this compost over here, come pick it up. So we'll use our software to coordinate that. Your idea.
Instead of a mass media system where it's like there's a big company that broadcasts to consumers, it's more of a mouth-to-mouth, peer-to-peer thing.
Exactly, but again, we're getting very specific. We have the new agrarian center at Oberlin that's running this thing called City Fresh. They're building greenhouses, straw bale greenhouses, and we're going to be working on software specifically for them to use in the real world. Right? Now, I mean, I'm all into academia, but I promise you that we're going to be doing real world projects that real people are going to use. That's part of the deal. Are you still scratching, or is this the halfway answer? Okay, dude. I'm sorry about that. All right. Continuing on, let's not forget health and wellness. So my favorite thing about the type 2 diabetes idea is that right now, the way the system works, it demands that a type 2 diabetes patient get on a bus, come down over here to meet a doctor for 5 minutes, and maybe a nurse for 20 minutes. All right? And that's the only way the doctors get paid. So what we need to do is change the system so that a patient can dial in via video phone, talk to the doctor for 5 minutes, nurse for 20 minutes, but then be assigned a concierge or some sort of helper that will go to their house and show them how to cook healthy food, will show them how to take their blood, and in general be their hand-holding assistant, their concierge, right? That kind of job can be trained by peer-to-peer. You don't need someone to go to some fancy nursing school to teach that. So there we would write the software, we'd get the deal, we'd get the millions of dollars, we'd write the software, but we're not just doing content, we're also doing services, all right? And then of course there's these job and events databases, and there's that timeline, which is that shared timeline I talked to you about, and let's not forget cloud services, right? So we'll be drilling into that later on as well. All right, so have you all heard of this thing called One Community in town? All right, anybody? Thank God you haven't. It's quite an abominable, well, no, I'm sorry, this is going on camera. We think One Community is a great effort, and we love all that free, oh, it's not free, oh yeah, so we love all your effort, okay? Well, the problem is that One Community is just the hardware, it's just the spigot. So they create these giant pipes, but there's no shit going through the pipes. So we're the shit merchants, right? We're the guys who are going to make sure that there's some bits rolling through these pipes. And that's called applications and services. And on top of that, that's called a solution. Now I'm giving you this pitch in case you haven't noticed. This is the standard pitch I have to give to all these people to explain to them what we're doing, right? But for the rest of this course, for the whole year, we're going to be drilling down into the bits and all the things it takes to do this, right? So let's see, let me switch over here. And everything we've been doing so far is simply this first thing, like what is a digital city, right? But let me just give you an idea of what else we're going to do. Let me tilt it that way. Oh, now it's not focusing, right? Is it okay? All right, so that's what we've been talking about. And then I'm going to pitch digital lifestyle aggregation, what the hell that means. I'm going to explain the open mesh, which is this distributed architecture. We're going to talk about citizen dashboards. That's what we're going to be building. Can you read that at all? And what's coming? It's out of focus? Okay. All right, so this is this physical book, right? Textbook that even you can get free PDF for, okay? And what I'm supposed to be doing is going like this to delineate the video that he's recording so that each time I go to another section, I can slice it up. But of course, we're like way behind schedule, okay? All right, so meanwhile, there's this dashboard notion, and I just got to show you this cool book because I created this book just for you guys. Oh, here's a good one. It would be nice to actually get some real work done. There it is, okay? So to produce any project, here are the basic steps necessary. So my first time I taught was in 1990, and it was in a class called How to Be a Multimedia Producer. So one thing I'd like to make sure you guys know how to do is to produce projects and what it takes to create specifications, testing, et cetera, so even you can become a software professional, okay? Here's a good line. Who's going to own the code? So we're going to talk about open source and the different kind of licenses that we're going to put our code out underneath, okay? And then we're going to have action items. And this is all just chapter 1. This is just week 1, right? So we got Thursday. See, I designed it so it was all one lecture, but of course then they tell me break it into 2 parts. Okay, but anyway, so, and then this is a preview of the other book, which is this book, which are also are all free to download the PDF for, or God forgive, you can actually go buy a copy if you're into it, okay? All right, so now I'm going to finish this pitch on, this guy, on the day in the life of the digital city. So just imagine. Go into your local coffee shop, the Phoenix or the Arabica, right? And there's a monitor up on the wall. And there it says, so-and-so just friended somebody, and I got, some snide remark about Britney Spears, or and then there's something about, oh my God, Michael Jackson, they're calling it a homicide, right? And then there's something like, oh, Cash for Clunkers is over with, I guess I missed my opportunity. Is this ringing familiar at all? It's like Twitter. It's like Facebook, right? But imagine if there was that for our community, for your local community, in Youngstown or Akron or wherever. And the things that were going up there were the things that were relevant to the people that are around you. So I made up this woman's book club, and that they were bitching about Oprah and Martha Stewart, right? And then there was like the cafe that put up its daily specials, or whatever. You can just imagine, it could be anything. Right? And this is how we're showing activity streams being used out in the real world in our digital city. All right? And there's our webcams. So I can go double click on a webcam and go to a page that's all about that webcam. And guess what I spent a lot of my time doing? Building a regional alliance. Because it's not just about Cleveland, right? It's about Youngstown and Akron and Dayton and Toledo and Pittsburgh and Purdue and Columbus, and we all have the same problems, right? And so by designing this thing to be around these little modular digital bureaus, we can set one up. It can focus on just the regional area. That focuses on the real world stuff, right? So if I upload a list of local events and something to help on, it's the Waterloo Street Festival, it's the Hester Street Festival, it's the Welcome Barbecue yesterday at 5 o'clock that I couldn't find. As we're over at the Barking Spider right now, drinking hard cider. It's that kind of local stuff, but yet we're put into the context of the whole platform, which everybody who's using the software is all connected to, right? Does that make sense? All right. Now the sustainable model that I was pitching to you, well, if you're not from the business school, I guess you don't care about business. It's a very interesting point. Many programmers are just happy just getting a job. And I've been employing and hiring programmers for 25 years. But some programmers have greater ambition. Some people even want to do special studies with me and create their own software and look at their email throughout the entire class. And what we're going to try to do is train people in jobs more than just creative jobs. We're going to try to focus on a wide range of jobs because we need to have something that's going to really cover the whole gamut. Okay? And here I am. I moved here. When I met John, I said, John, I'm going to move here. And I did. And to give you the sob story, I left my family in Florida. I tore my family apart so I could come here and bring you the message. And then hopefully we'll get some traction and some money and I'll be able to move them here. And I will have my daughters on stage dancing and singing. Okay? And we're talking to all these big companies and we're doing all this stuff. And I think what I want to do right now, speaking of my daughter, because I kind of miss her. Sorry. I created this special video. Oh, sorry, not that one. Let's go to my account. And I'm going to show you a video I made. And I'm clearly not a video editor. You know, I'm just like a guy. Maybe that'll work. And then we go to my videos. Okay, so this is something I just did recently. Just to let you know. And I did this as a going away present for her.
Thank you. Blue. 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 How can I land?
Do you miss me?
Yes, it's blue. Yes. Whatever. Blue. 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 Whatever.
All right. So hopefully you get an idea of what this class is about, right? We're going to do this project. Even you could become a digital video editor, okay? We're going to dig into LAMP code. We're going to have lots and lots of code to edit if you want to. Okay? I'm going to challenge you. Oh, here's another thing. Here's a cool thing. So one of the things in the book, I wanted to come up with, like, you know, how can I make this class fun and compelling? I remember I went to music school, right? And they had this thing called the drop the needle test. Well, they would literally drop a needle on a record in the middle of some symphony, and you have to name the symphony, right? So here we go. What does federating mean? I actually said it earlier today. It's when you connect together ID systems. Tell me about XML-RPC. When was it launched? How did it replace or compete with whatever happened to it? What has taken over from it? You ever heard of XML-RPC? Okay. What is Moore's Law? Huh? What does copyleft mean? Well, this will give you some idea of the questions and challenges I'll be doing. Oh yeah, here's a good shot. Let me zoom in on this. Here is this bum laying on the street. There he is, right outside the Beachland. And it is a live bum, drunk, falling down on the street. This is my introduction to Cleveland, right? So I said, hey, any city that's willing to let their drunks just lay on the streets, got it. That's a city for me. Okay? And then here's a good shot. This is me. Oops, sorry. This is me with the head of Facebook, the head of MySpace, the head of Google, and me. The coders, the guys who actually write the code, right? And then me, okay? And then here's another one. This is how I like to preach to the youth, right? In the pool, all right? So think of this as our virtual pool. We're here to change the world, right? And that's the introduction to the first class. And now we have time to actually converse and interact, because that is a key part of learning. As Plato and Aristotle said, you got the one-to-one, the one-to-few, and the one-to-many. So I did the one-to-many. Now let's do the one-to-the-few. And any of you are welcome at any time to mano a mano, or mano a mane, or however you pronounce it. Question?
What language would we write code in?
I'm kind of adverse against SOAP, But if you can make it XML RPC or RESTful, I don't give a damn what's on the other side. Literally. So ASP.NET, Java, LAMP, Python, Ruby, I don't care. As long as the server code you write can talk to me RESTful APIs. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
All right. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right.
There are like millions of social networking and community sites. How, I guess, and they all want to have a ton of users and everything, but I guess what do we do differently that
Okay, I want to answer that question. Let me get to the others because that's like a half hour.
Gotcha.
Okay? All right, go.
So what's so important about having the cameras in the stores and such like that can be controlled? I mean, people had webcams in the 90s, you know, people could like move them around. So.
Well, it's kind of interesting because that is actually, so if I'm in Akron and I want to dial into what's going on in Collinwood, I dial into that thing, there's going to be cameras on all these angles, and I can literally see. When I was doing a digital city in Trieste, we had people dialing into the clubs to see whether, you know, like there's 5 clubs, I can choose which club to go to based on who's there. Right? So it's literally a real-time connection. You heard of Justin.tv? Right? So we're going to be able to use this technology to get people to dial into the real-time web.
Well then, to follow up to that, you know, isn't that better served by sort of like these one-shot web apps where you could have like something where you could say, oh, I want to see what's going on in this club or this restaurant. Isn't that better just by itself rather as instead of this part of the network?
All right, now that goes back to DLAs, digital lifestyle aggregation. There's 2 schools of thought here. If Jason Fried from 37 Signals was teaching this class, he would agree with you. Right? So there's an entire school of thought that says, KISS, the less is better. Right? And the problem is that not everybody is famous as Jason Fried. He did Backpack and Basecamp. Okay? So from the user experience point of view, you could argue that keeping a simple set of features, simple notion, simple idea is the best way, at least in the early stages of a learning curve. Okay? But you have to discover that company. You have to discover that little app. How many iPhone apps are there?
Too many.
Right. So this is the problem. It's great for the top 1%, but not everybody else. Right? So my argument around digital lifestyle aggregation is that by having an integrated environment that aggregates content and is highly customizable, you customize it to things that are relevant to you, and then so you can make yourself simple or medium or complex. It's up to you, but it's customized to you. So there's a very historical note. Back in the day, a software company would have multiple products, and a product would have multiple features. During the 90s, everyone was racing to do their IPO so quickly that these companies were going public with 1 product and 1 or 2 features. Now, when the first dot-bomb explosion happened, or implosion, all the programmers were scattered to the wind. So instead of being in Route 128 in Silicon Valley, you now had guys in Dubrovnik and Berlin and wherever, right? And they're all sitting there without a job. So the blogosphere was born. Because all these guys are sitting at home and there's these thinkers and marketing people and they all started blogging because it was very simple to do that. And it's very simple to be like a Jason Fried and get a copy of Ruby and do this little product that has 1 feature. But that's not a product. And that's not a full experience. And so if you can band together and you can find enough smart enough people to have 25 or 35 different apps that all together create a comprehensive experience, go for it. Or if you're trying to train this ex-auto worker, you get him in the front door of this experience and you gradually open up to him this whole world and you let him control it. Now we can go back to your question. So Facebook and MySpace and all these folks are horizontal social networks. They're centralized databases, all controlled by 1 entity. And luckily, we were able to play David off of Goliath and get them kind of guilting out on each other. So they've been kind of using open as a way to kind of validate themselves. And even David Recordin, my close friend, went to go work for Facebook yesterday. So Facebook is doing a lot of the right things, but there's still a closed data silo. Now, I believe that the future is a combination of these horizontal networks and tens of thousands of vertical networks. You're into reggae, you're into chocolate, you're into the Indians and Shaq, all right? And so it's a combination of the horizontal and vertical together. Now, the key thing we'll be doing is we're never, ever competing with those folks. So we'll have Facebook Connect and we'll support Open Social and we'll integrate our activity streams with their activity streams and we'll complement them. So at no time am I saying we're going to do what Facebook is doing. But I don't necessarily see Facebook doing what we're doing. So there's room for both, right? Megan.
I'm still learning this new concept, and I'm just curious, like, how do you deal with like data overflow? Like what you said, everything can.
Is it information overflow or data overflow?
Or maybe information, and how do you set up priority? How we present it to the audience? So like right now when Google just started, you can really search with a lot of results, but only those
on the top.
Right, and
Yeah.
people keep wanting to go to the top there, so
Yeah.
how do you deal with that?
Well, as we've seen, how did Bing relate to it, right? Bing made sure that their results were better quality results. Bing has done a lot of really, really smart things, so they can compete with Google, all right? And why do you want to have a DLA? Why do you want to have an integrated environment? So you can customize the things you're interested in, all right? So to do that, we need to have users who are smart enough to know that they can actually customize their RSS feeds. They can actually choose what their followers are. Choosing Oprah or Ashton Kutcher isn't necessarily going to get you the kind of information you want, and that's what you want. And you might as well follow Perez Hilton, with that matter, right? But if you know what you want to follow and you know what you want to track and keep things, you are the ultimate filter. So it's our job is to give you the powers to do that.
Why do users know what they want?
Why do they?
Well, how do we assume that no one told anyone pre-Facebook that I want to have, this social? No one was told. Any of the users that use the system and hopefully use
right.
the system we're building know,
what they want.
Yeah, we don't want to give them. I mean, they know that it is now a tool. Now Twitter.
After the fact.
After the fact.
This is the catch-22, dude. This is that exactly the learning curve thing I'm telling you about. That's the aha moment after you've gone one through the cycle. That's why we want our digital bureau to be a physical place so that person can get up, walk over to them, ask them here, and get a coffee, ask them there. It's about human to human. It's not going to all happen through cyber. It's the balancing act of cyber and human together. Right? That's the whole point, is that we need to go through this learning curve. Now, what a single welfare mom needs, I can tell you what a single welfare mom needs. She needs a daycare center. So when she goes up with the kids, she can drop off the kids behind a fence so they can play in a safe environment so she can go use a computer. That's what she needs. And what does a felon need? A felon needs a second chance. What does an ex-auto worker need? He needs some reason, some excuse to get online. Now here's my dream scenario. This guy comes online, he creates the 67 Corvette group, right? Finds all these people. He's also an amateur photographer, so he learns that he can go copy a blurb, the same thing I'm using, and he can take photos and make little wedding albums and anniversary books and stuff and sell them, make $50 copy profit, right? Then he finds out, he's looking at this list of volunteer events, he's going, yeah, maybe I'll volunteer. Holy shit, that's the thing that my wife is organizing. So he can get some points with his wife by volunteering through the system, right? So anytime you can connect the real world, she's at the church, trying to do a bake sale, and here's a list of 6 volunteers we got. Wow, that's my husband. He actually volunteered. He's getting laid tonight. Right? And so this is the circle of life. This is the whole point, is you want to connect. So this technology thing is not going away. And all these people have to wake up that they better get a clue. You all got a clue. The trick is, how do we get everybody else to get a clue? And there's a lot of different ways we do that. It's not going to be one way. And that's part of why we want the cog side people and the business people part of this process. Because we need to study that and figure out what's the best way to do that. Does that make sense? Got a question? All right. How about you over there?
I got a question.
Go.
Your system seems very multidisciplinary.
Very.
Multidisciplinary.
Yes.
You're drawing on all sorts of things, connecting all kinds of things that most people wouldn't see connections between. You're showing us pictures of LeBron.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your book there, which I think is amazing, by the way, that you have that in the book already. What's the connection? How does this relate to the Cavaliers, man? Are we going to win this championship this year or what?
Well, a very interesting point, because my friend Ted Leonsis gave a big chunk of the Wizards to Michael Jordan. And how long did he stay? 2 seasons? Right? But he, from an equity point of view, still owns the Wizards. Now, Michael Jordan is motivated to make the Wizards successful because he's got equity in the company. And so I come into this region, Neo, and I find basically 4 kinds of people, right? There are the local boosters who aren't necessarily know what the hell I'm talking about. But because it's about Cleveland and Neo, they support me. right? There are the techies, the geeks, the practitioners, who can see that by having these shared servers, they could build things on top of that, and they go right on. And I need to be able to turn to you, and you need to go, yeah, this guy's the real shit, right? You know, because the people I'm pitching, the third kind of people, the money people, they don't know what the hell I'm talking about either, right? But they got the money, and they know that they're getting bad returns on their dollars, and they just lost 40% on their 401k, but they still need to invest, because that's their job, right? And then there's the potential customers of ours. These are the people who are going to be writing us checks. Lev Gonick in the university is that, right? Government, foundations, all these people. And so this whole scam, this whole chess game, is designed to extract money out of them. Now, in the world of entertainment and sports, it's pretty straightforward. You know, you get the all-stars, they play, tickets come in, television revenues, sell swag. It's a simple business model. In the 1980s, there were hundreds of software companies. In the 1990s, there were thousands of software companies. In this decade, there have been tens of thousands of software companies. And guess what's happening in the next decade? There will be hundreds of thousands of software companies. I'm an old school guy. I come from the world where you make a great product, you promote it, and somebody buys it. It ain't that simple anymore. So we're having to do this whole, excuse the expression, fucking chess game to come up with enough sustainable models and constituents and stakeholders and agenda, and I'm going to create a hybrid of a 501c3 and a for-profit, because I can't ask a VC to invest in a nonprofit, and I can't be all altruistic and talk about giving things away in a for-profit. So to play the chess game, we're having to do a fairly complex model, right? And so now that's my biggest challenge, is how do I water down this thing? I got it all the way down to 3 pages, right? How do I explain what it is I want to do so to get people all excited about it? So I have to use metaphors like Shaq and all that sort of stuff. Now, the issue of interdisciplinary is that I snuck in the side door via Lev, right? So he understood me technically. He pointed at Merrill and said, hey, get Marc a class. But what I'm going to be spending my whole time is over in Weatherford or Weatherhead and all these other places trying to get other people interested so we can be truly an interdisciplinary class. And so then ideally, we would be like, okay, the geeks show up this day and the business nerds show up this day and we'll all get together on this day. And I mean, you know, we'll somehow figure out how to parse it, right? Because we need all players, all these different kind of players, right? Does that make sense? All right. Now, here's the thing, getting back to the viral thing and going through the loop, right? I got my case ID tomorrow. I still don't even have my case ID. They give me my appointment letter on Friday, which meant that if you go to the listing of the class, it says staff, right? You might have noticed some posters around town. I put those up. There's this one shot of me walking and my foot's kind of raised. I call that my stepping razor shot. Do you know the song? It's like a stepping razor, don't you watch my step, I'm dangerous, dangerous. So that's me, okay? I'm here to affect change. I'm a change catalyst, right? An element of change, right? And to do that, I need you all because we got a whole lot of empty seats here. Got to tell your brethren and your sistren, we need more people to come to help change the world. I can't do that. That's up to you. All right? So please, if you find this class somewhat interested, everything's going to be recorded. There's not going to be much to be able to slice up this week. It's all just one ramble. But I will be very systematic in trying to compartmentalize each message and each part of the equation into a permalink page. So now that all goes into the Google memory banks. I get all my friends to blog it. And by the way, they are encouraging me to do remotely teach. So when I'm in Europe between the 16th and the 27th, I'm going to remotely teach via Adobe Connect. All right? And then as all this stuff gets digitized and encoded and put online, then I get my buddies to all blog about it. Right? So now we got the whole world dialing in. Then I get my buddies to dial in for classes. So it'll be Doc Searles, it'll be Dave Weiner, it'll be Chris Messina, probably Joseph Smar. These are all people who are actively involved in this world. If you've got particular VIPs that you'd love to hear from, I probably know them. All right, we'll get them to become part of our class. All right? So that's the promise I can make to you, that this is going to be incredibly relevant. If there's something you see and you hear about, it's your job to ask me about. All right? And I will explain it to you from the inside point of view. What happened that day when Bill Gates came up and smoked a joint with me, and then we don't know. Or what about that guy? What's this real story about Larry Ellison? And I mean, I got all the dirt on all these guys, okay? So that just keeps it interesting, keeps it relevant, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, point of order, I haven't written a line of code since 1983. Because somebody's got to be the boss. And what I found is that every single boss I had was an idiot. And I said, man, I can do a better job than that. And what I specialize in is dabbling in everything and doing nothing, right? What you want to do is surround yourself with the world-class experts. And one thing a programmer can't do is bullshit me. Right? So don't even try. Right? You get to make shitty code. It gets to be buggy. It probably won't work. I expect the UI to suck. Right? But it does what it's supposed to do. That's all. It's a very simple notion. It's very simple requirements. Like I said, I don't care what the hell you write it in. As long as I'm passing my parameters and you're stuffing your bits over here and I'm achieving that stuff. I do UI. Right? That's what I'm about. Okay? Any more questions? I hope I'm keeping it real here. I'm not sure how many professors use swear words and sex and drugs and rock and roll, but that's just who I am. I was born on the day that Humphrey Bogart died, by the way, and I'm kind of experiencing a kind of an Orson Welles effect in my life. Are you all familiar with Orson Welles? Dude, tell me you don't know who Orson Welles is.
I know who he is.
Okay. Do you know what he did when he was 25? It was called The War of the Worlds. I think 2 people were killed that night. They were so terrified. Okay? When he was 29, he did Citizen Kane. And for the rest of his life, he lived under the shadow of that. He could never achieve the same success that he did. I hate to say this, but it's almost exactly my life. It's kind of pathetic, but what?
Rand Miller, same way.
Right. But dude, Rand Miller ain't Orson Welles. Orson Welles created the greatest film ever, right? I helped change the world. Okay, I brought multimedia to a lot of people that wouldn't have had it. And nobody gives a shit about that. That and a 6-pack of beer will copy a buzz on a Friday night. All right? Nobody cares. I had my 15 minutes 20 years ago. So there have been some scenarios of the Phoenix reborn. In fact, some psychologists studied that most creative people peak when they're either 30 or 50. I'm trying to peak at both. All right? So it's a really hard challenge. And of course, the idea here is to inspire you guys to get it on. I can tell you that there was a couple of times where people came up to me like 15 years later and said, you know, I had a lunch with you in 1986. And I left that lunch and I spent the next 10 years focused on that. And look, here I am today, and you gave me my career start, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, so did you write me a check? Because more times than not, they didn't. But that's okay. You know, I got news for you. I used to be rich. Being rich is way overrated. There aren't any happy rich people. They're all really miserable. And what matters is family and creativity, you know, and happiness. That's what matters, not money. Money does not bring you happiness. Anyway, I think we're done. So thank you for the first class.